Hey, welcome to Abyss Gazing, a horror podcast where we celebrate all things spooky and mental health.
I'm your co-host, Mark.
I'm your other co-host, Josh.
And we have with us a plethora of roles for the movie Apparitions. They are writers, directors, producers, actor, and editor, Paul Anthony Nelson and Perry Cumming.
Hi, lovely to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us on. I'm the editor, she's the actor. Everything else we do together.
I gotta say, like, this is the first time that I think since we started this podcast, but also like Victims as a whole, I don't think I've ever had a directing duo come on and do it. Like when you have like comic book creators, it's like, okay, you have the writer, you have the artist, like that's the kind of like pairing you expect. But I guess my first question for you guys is, how did you guys kind of start up deciding to work together and really pursue a partnership as writers and directors?
Funny story. So we did a play together in 2007 as actors, and directed by someone who we would later cast in one of our movies. And we met, we hit it off, and we started dating, and we've been dating ever since. So we have...
so we're a couple in real life as well as filmmaking.
Yeah, partners in life, love, and the cinematic madness. So we sort of obviously, you know, connected on certain tastes and things like that. And I come from a very film buff type background. I'm, you know, so I guess I'd call myself a cinephile if I wanted to sound embarrassing.
And I come from a theatre background, so I come from a more art house background. So we kind of see our brand as kind of art house meets grindhouse. But I guess we just started talking about projects, and it was natural to kind of start working together.
Yeah. And actors always like it when there's a, you know, filmmaker in the house can put them in things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Apparitions is quite an interesting project. I don't want to give away too much, but Mark and I kind of, as we were talking about it early on in our festival committee meetings, we were talking about because he got a chance to watch it before me, and he was talking about how like it's a ghost story, but then it's not a ghost story, and that's just what I will say. The film is making its U.S. premiere with Horrific Hope. It is is headlining our Imaginary Friends block on Saturday, April 30th, along with The Telltale Heart, Only Escape, and Noelle. And I just want to let you guys know that we're both really big fans of this movie. And I personally am such a big fan because I love to have my expectations averted as a viewer. And I'm kind of wondering if you guys can talk about I don't want to say this, the struggle or the abilities, but like the journey of creating a non-traditional ghost story.
Well, firstly, thank you for your kind words and your love of our movie. We're so floored by that.
I think we really love ghost stories. And I think one of the things that we wanted to do was to, on a minimal budget, like throw as much creativity on the actual atmosphere and building up an anticipation of something. And then we really wanted to throw it in a different direction. We were looking at the idea of, are you destined to become
your parents?
If something's happened to your parents, are you destined to have a similar thing happen, or are you destined to follow in their footsteps in some way or think the way that they do? And how can you break free of that as you graduate into being an adult, which literally graduates in the beginning of the film? So that was kind of the stepping point for the story. And from there, the ghosts of the past, which I think we're all haunted with. We're all haunted by ghosts of, you know, our parents and even like shades of our former selves. So that's something that we wanted to explore through it, that Lily actually has to meet her past self through the process to be able to get to a point where hopefully she'll be a little bit less broken.
Or succumb to the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was... like you said, I got to watch it first. And without giving a lot away, as little as possible. Like he said, it's a ghost movie that's not a ghost movie. And I started watching it as if it was a ghost movie because I hadn't gotten that far into it yet. Also being a fan of the supernatural ghost movie genre in general. So it was interesting to see it do its twist the way it did. And it was generally just put together well as a story overall. And the way it plays out, it makes sense without being that out of nowhere twist like you get in like some of Shyamalan, however you say it.
M. Night Shyamalan.
Yeah.
One of us will get it.
Yeah, that crazy twist that happens in the end of some of his films.
Those twists, I mean, they make his movies fun, but a lot of them were just kind of like out of nowhere. Like The Village the twist was it's modern day and they're living in the national park. So it didn't feel like that. It just felt like a natural progression of the story.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for that. I love that you're taking great care to not spoil apparitions, but The Village, screw that.
If you haven't seen The Village by now, that's your fault.
Yeah. And I'm so sorry for anyone who has seen The Village. I'm just not a fan of that. And I'm going to say something pretty ambiguous is when I watched Apparitions for the first time, it reminded me of this movie, structurally speaking. And I'm not going to say what this movie that I'm currently holding up the Blu-ray for is, because again, it spoils the movie. But one of the things that you talked about, Perry, is kind of the like being confronted with the ghost of pasts. And one of the things that we specifically, when we were curating this year's lineup, was we tried to have films that were celebrating the genre of film, but also at the same time weren't afraid to address mental health topics. And while not every film in this year's lineup is going to do both of those things, I think that Apparitions is among one of the fearless films that we have this year, because it is, here you have a protagonist that quite literally doesn't know where she comes from. And I think that's one of the most terrifying things to kind of terrifying situations to be in, is just kind of having a loss of identity. And I loved the character exploration that we're going on to see that, because not only do we see it through Lily's eyes, but we also see it through the best friend's eyes as well, where she thinks that she knows this, this girl Lily so well. And then as the film kind of progresses, you learn all of these like really dark and mysterious things that happen to her because of not being connected to where she comes from.
And the profound loneliness that comes with all that too. Like Lily feels this complete isolation at all times.
I think that's what you say is really heartening, because as filmmakers, first and foremost, we love genre films and we want to make good stories that people enjoy, but also, we're continually trying to find what we truly have to say as artists and filmmakers. And we hope that rather than that hitting people over the head, that kind of seeps into the bones of our story, and it's kind of just this kind of rich bed that the story sits on, really.
And gives people the room to kind of dig into it and come out with their own interpretations and their own sort of readings without, screaming through a bullhorn, this is what this film is about. This is how you're meant to feel. Yeah, because absolutely, if other people connect to the film in a different way, we love that. We love those films that we go and see. And Paulie has a completely different read on the read that I had of the story because of my experience and what I'm going through in that moment, that the story is open enough that you can connect to it no matter where you are.
Yeah,
I love that you got all that from.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, sorry. We love that you got it.
It's like, because I rewatched it in anticipation for recording with you guys, and I wrote it on my letterbox. Like, I fell in love with this movie like all over again, and honestly, can't wait to watch this on the big screen with an audience, because there's something really profound about a lot of the character journeys that I think not only with Lily but the best friends whose name is mistaken.
Alice. Yeah.
Alice, yeah, who's kind of coming away from me at the moment. But there it is. Like I think they both kind of have these interesting journeys that, also at the same time, like, I don't know what I would do if I found out that Mark, had like this like weird past where he was like a serial killer in another life, or like this whole time that we've been friends and he's just like, yeah, I have bodies in my basement. What's up?
Yeah. People keep disappearing around it. Why does that happen?
I did have a good take on the Ted Bundy movie, so you never know.
You did. But the last question I want to talk about this before we talk about our main feature, is Perry. In this movie, you play a pretty badass cop.
Yeah.
How much of this is autobiographical or a fantasy come to life?
Oh, I love it. I love playing a cop. I think that I tend to play authority figures a bit more now, which is great. I love playing a badass. It's a complete fantasy camp character for me. But also, in the family genre, in the family story that we're telling, Wilkes represents the mother character. And, it was based on the idea of myself being a single mum at the time. And, like with my girls, one of my girls is in the film, Kate O'Connor is actually my daughter. So we really wanted to enhance that kind of mother-daughter relationship, so that Wilkes is not only the cold case detective who has been completely obsessed with this case, but she's also kind of a surrogate mother figure for Lily. And I think that's even a bit more heartbreaking when she starts to have doubts about, what Lily has perhaps become.
Go ahead, Mark.
I think the nice thing for me is I've been watching horror since I was a kid. I mean, so 80s, early 80s. We've discussed this a couple times on the podcast, and it's not often anymore you come across something with as much as I've watched over the years. It has a little bit of a surprise to it, and that was kind of the refreshing thing with the story to me. It was like, oh, well, this is kind of unusual and new in a story. So it was nice to see something a little refreshing for a change instead of a rehash of the same thing over and over again.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. Wish more people got it the way you guys
did. Beginning April 30th here, if you guys are in Winchester, Virginia, you guys can get your tickets now for Horrific Hope, which is going to include the U.S. premiere of Apparitions, and along with the Tale to Heart, Only Escape, Noel, and much more. We have so many Virginia premieres, world premieres, and U.S. premieres, which also includes Apparitions. And I'm really excited to see this with an audience. So make sure that you guys get your tickets. Links are going to be in the descriptions below. But on this episode, we felt like since we were bringing filmmakers on to talk about their ghost movie, we should probably also talk about another ghost movie that's very famous, has a pretty huge cult following behind it. Mark, what are we talking about?
13 Ghosts. The remake of 13 Ghosts specifically.
Yeah. I was about to say, I was like, we have to get specific there.
Yeah.
Steve Beck's 13 Ghosts, not William Castle 13 Ghosts.
And see, I've seen both. Like with a lot of these, I've seen both of them. And well, where do we want to start with this, Josh? Do we want to give a background, or are we assuming by now people have watched it in the 20 years it's been out?
Yeah, so this is we're just gonna throw up a quick spoiler warning real quick. We were talking about this when we met up for dinner a couple weeks ago, Mark, but like the difference between the 13 Ghosts like 1960 to like 2001 is like just a stark difference, like night and day, absolutely. And I have a crazy theory, if you'll entertain me for a few moments, that this isn't actually a remake, but a spiritual sequel to the original. And so my theory comes from that because of the antagonist that's like the billionaire guy that's crazy and has his house set up like the freaking box from Hellraiser. Yeah, it might as well be the box from Hellraiser. The lament configuration, that's the word I'm looking for.
There it is.
But like there is a character in the original 1960s movie that actually has his surname. So maybe it's not an exact one, but you know, that's my theory, is that that's how they can tonally exist to be completely different.
And things got a lot worse in the 40 years that followed. It's like you kind of went from this fun, jocular, hey, everything's great, to 2001, where it's like, no, everything's bloody and unsparing and nails in heads, and it's awful.
Even though
the world got dark.
Even though this is supposed to be a remake, one of the interesting things that I really found is watching the original. They tell you at the beginning, if you have these glasses, when we get to these scenes, put them on. If you believe in ghosts, don't put them on if you don't, or vice versa. And if you do, because we used a camera filter to imitate the glasses, because obviously God knows how many years later, we don't have glasses like that. And basically what it would do is it would mask the ghost so you didn't see the ghost in the original. So they took a play on the glasses and made them in the new movie have to wear the glasses to see the ghost. So I thought that was a really cool take of how to translate that from the original to the new.
I love how they kept that. I just have to say, I have this awesome William Castle box set from Indicator, and it has 13 ghosts in it, and you can watch it with. Oh wait, I thought they had the glasses. I thought there was a glasses option. Is there somewhere else? But yes, apparently you can watch it with a thing. I thought the illusion was in here. Yeah. Oh, look at me ruining your podcast with my
it's like
revelations. But yes, apparently there is some sort of option to be able to watch it like that. So
I just wonder if they've got an option to watch the Tingler with the electrodes in the chair, so that you like they originally showed it in the cinema.
I could have sworn I pulled that out the other night and showed you. Anyway, carry on. It's a great box set anyway. Other than that,
I think I've watched this. I think I've watched 1960s version wrong. Because I saw it on Shudder back when it was on there like a year ago, and because I was curious, I really liked 13 Ghosts, the movie we're talking about today. I am the youngest person on this call, so this movie is a movie that I came out in my time, so it was made for my generation. But I think you can't have Steve Beck's version without William Castle's version. And William Castle's version is really interesting because like we were saying, like they're tonally completely different. Whereas like 2001, it feels like a haunted house with like slasher energy because it's like really fun and it's like a display of like practical effects. You get into the original one. The original one has this like much more like grounded approach with witchcraft and like Ouija boards and like, you know, we're gonna summon the devil, but you know, like summon the dead and like raise the dead and like see what the ghosts we can. And I found that to be like a really interesting take on this like story.
Yeah, it's I guess it's also the change in the time as well. Like Castle was very much into sort of matinee drive-in spook shows, and people would sort of, come and have fun, and his films would often have comedy with horror. Whereas Dark Castle Entertainment, which were originally started by Joel Silver and Robert Zemeckis and Gilbert Adler, who are the producers behind HBO's Tales from the Crypt, they originally started Dark Castle to remake Castle's properties, but as modern day kind of more serious horror movies with comic elements. You've got to have your Matthew-Lillard drooling everywhere at some point.
It's got Matthew-Lillard in it.
He ends up drooling. So they did House on Haunted Hill, which was their first project, which is also a remake of a Castle film. Then they did this, and then they kind of departed from that brief pretty quickly and just started, doing all sorts of, like, Ghost Ship is a Val Lewton title, and Gothica is a whole new original thing, and they kind of went off on this other direction. But yeah, there is this sort of new horror, NU-horror, new horror sort of thing going on with this film, where the ghosts are just so much more aggressive. And the castle stuff is like fun and aren't they spooky? And this is like, no, these ghosts are just out to mess you up. And
it's more frightening.
They're angry and caged. But as we find, there are reasons why they're so.
I also really love the way that in the modern one they have translated that idea of witchcraft and the spells. Like, the house in itself is one of the most fascinating things, and all of the holding spells that are written on the walls and stuff like that add such a beautiful texture. But it's fascinating. Like, I want to go down that kind of internet deep dive and find out exactly what those spells are, because I'm always intrigued with that kind of stuff.
There's been a fan theory going around for like years, and petition. I think there's even a couple petitions that have gone out that, like, they want Netflix to basically not necessarily remake 13 Ghosts, but do a limited series where they kind of tell the backstories of all the ghosts. And you do get a little bit of that in here, but I think that there's not enough for you to connect with the ghosts, because it is trying to, like you were saying, Paul, like, there's definitely a lot of like, oh, we're going to take these like really fun William Castle movies and we're going to remake them with like more serious, but there's going to be a little bit of comedy in here, and you kind of miss out on that characterization by doing that.
Yeah. And oh my God, I mean, that concept you just said, that limited set, like, that has Mike Flanagan's name all over it.
Dude,
like,
yes.
You could absolutely see Mike Flanagan doing, a 14-part show where each episode is based on it. Like, the modern story is framed by the story of the ghost.
Yeah, you could just about see the way he would cast it, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Carla Gugino, Henry Thomas.
You could almost start the series with the concept of building the house and how he came up with the idea. Do the intermediate, all the middle of it is the backstory to each ghost. And then the actual events leading up to the movie.
And how he's sort of, this person is, gone more and more crazy doing this and megalomaniacal over the journey.
And you've also got that fantastic book in the film that, that you can start. You could just see them flipping the pages and kind of going into that story.
Did you also see the famed horror comic book artist, the original Swamp Thing artist, Bernie Wrightson was the conceptual designer of the film for the characters.
So, just for the characters,
Really?
he designed the house?
Yeah, he did the character conceptual artwork. Yeah.
Oh, amazing.
I see his name jumped out at me on the credits. Like, Bernie Wrightson worked on this? I wonder if he drew the art in the book. I couldn't quite tell. They look sort of Wrightson-esque, but they're more sketchy. But he was the conceptual designer on the.
Because I mean, if they did a series, I really want an episode on the Juggernaut. I found the Juggernaut to be most interesting to me.
Yeah, it's just laying waste to people at the junkyard.
Yeah.
My
and
wife
the guy with all the which one's the one with all the nails? Is that the Juggernaut?
The hammer.
That was
the guy
hammer.
with the hammer, with the 25 nails through his head. It's like
how did that happen?
Yeah, somebody wwent overkill on that guy. Like, that's out of order.
My wife was a big fan of the Jackal, the one with the cage over
yes. Cage and scratchy. Yeah, she looked like she came from Dr. Seward's asylum in Bram Stoker's Dracula with that box in her head. But no, it's that's the thing, and that's one of the things about this movie. I always leave it feeling a bit underdone, because it's like
there's so much to dig into.
Yeah, with those characters, I just wish they'd gotten into that more of those kind of it. It's fairly stripped back. There's a family in this house and they need to escape, and in the meantime, find everybody's sort of everybody who comes into their life is sort of working a different angle involving the ghosts in the house.
And I guess that was the price that they paid for creating such a great propulsion through the story as well. Like, it moves through the story lightning quick, and it is very exciting, kind of builds up your anticipation to the end.
What's really kind of sad is like I don't know what every version like out there like has as far as like the Blu-rays and DVDs, but I own the VHS copy, and yeah, that's right, I said VHS. And after the credits roll, there's like a little special feature that like takes you through kind of the process of how like Steve basically designed and like not only developed but also gave like all of the backstories to all of the ghosts. And so like you see like, and they're like showing there's like this diary with like concept art, and you're just like seeing like how like deep this movie like really could have been. And then you get like a one like throwaway scene, and they're kind of just like talking about like what each of the ghosts is and like how they ended up being ghosts and like how they got trapped. And it's like, bro, like there's so much mythology that you could be telling here.
Yeah.
There's too much side backstory for them not to do more with it.
Yes.
And it has been that way since that movie was in the theater. This has been stuff people, fans of the movie have said since it came out in the theaters, was that they need to do more with it and show more about the ghosts and the backstories and everything. So,
yeah, no, I love this. I love this Mike Flanagan limited series thing. I think you're onto something.
Yeah.
I'm gonna throw my hand in there. I'm currently rewatching the Watchmen series that Damon Lindelof did a couple years ago for HBO, and it's perfection. So I also think that Damon Lindelof might also be like another like off kilter choice, but I would be like there. And I mean, I don't know where the rights for this sit, but like this is a Warner Brothers release, so like I would love to see HBO take a crack at this.
HBO Max show maybe.
Yeah.
It's Max like a bit of genre outings. But yeah, Lindelof would be interesting because also too Lindelof doesn't mind a bit of a flashing back to see what a character's life was in the past and how that connects to the present. He's kind of made his name on that sort of thing. So good choice.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
Well, I have the list of ghosts here if you guys want to go through them real quick.
Juggernaut, Hammer.
So apparently on the DVD, there is a special feature called The Ghost Files, where Cyrus is our... he's a character in the movie. He's not exactly a protagonist, but he's not exactly an antagonist either. He's the linchpin that kind of holds everything together. But we have up first the firstborn son. He is, quote, a ghost of a bratty boy named Billy Myers, who loved to pretend to be a cowboy. One day, another little kid challenged Billy to a duel, but Billy's cap gun was no match for that boy's real steel, tipped arrow that Billy's ghost still carries. Unlike most of the ghosts, this one is a mild threat, never attacking anyone, and just saying, "I want to play." This is like having the ghost of Ricky Bobby as a child. Stop me if you guys ever want to talk about these ghosts for a few minutes. But the next one is called the Torso, and he is Jimmy, quote, the Gambler Gambino, was a gambler. I know, what a name. In the 1900s, who caught the attention of the mafia after he lost a boxing bet and didn't have the money to pay up. The mafia cut him into pieces and wrapped him in cellophane, dumping the remains in the ocean, and his ghost appears as a torso with a severed head nearby and is more than a neutral spirit than actively hostile. I don't really remember this guy.
No, I remember that
he's only in one or two scenes.
Yeah, he crawling along once or twice, but he doesn't really feature.
Was he a boxer himself? Because, he had a, well-developed torso. And, was he in fact the Teton boxer that, rigged the game?
He lost the boxing bet. Sorry.
So he's just a degenerate gambler who just got a hole. Yeah, got the wrong bookie. Okay, so we've got the. Was it the first child? What the
first?
The firstborn son, and then the torso. Next up is the bound woman. Susan Legault was the richest girl in town and was very popular. Her one flaw was that she toyed with boys and men, and during her senior prom night, she was killed by a jilted ex named Chet Walters, a star quarterback, after catching her cheating with another guy. Her ghost lures Bobby into the dangerous basement and still shows in her prom attire, bound ropes holding her arms. Yep, I don't remember this one either.
Yeah, no, I think definitely deserves her own episode.
She was another one like the torso that was only in like one or two quick scenes. Like the torso was just, I think, in the one scene crawling across the floor. She was just, they show like a flash of her and she's like hanging there.
Yeah, she's like cocking her head and twitching. Yeah.
I remember the actors' like body posture and the shapes that she was making with her body were really beautiful. Like even when they were standing in the circle, her posture and stuff like that was really striking. So I don't know, my eye was drawn to her, so I was definitely intrigued.
Perry's a physical theatre buff and studied physical theatre, so it makes absolute sense that would pop out to her.
Anyone who's twisting their body in an unusual way is going to stand out to me.
It's kind of like talking about that. The Silent Hill movie that they did, the nurses, when they were looking at the mannerisms of the video game, they decided the best people to use for the nurses in the movie that could do the body control and twitching and weird movement would be dancers. So all the nurses in the Silent Hill movie were dancers because of their use of body control and movement and their ability to do it.
Yeah.
That's
right.
I mean, I'm also looking up these pictures as I'm like reading these. And like, I definitely don't remember this woman at all, but there's a 13 ghost still with the logo on here. So I'm like, well, she's got to be in the movie.
Yeah, it's for maybe 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and then that end scene when they show them all standing around the circle. It's not like she's one of the main ones that you see that everybody knows. The Hammer, the Juggernaut, the princess.
Angry Princess, I think it is.
Yeah. The Angry
Maybe
Princess.
they took. Yeah, I noticed the topless one got a lot more screen time than anyone else. I'm sure that was a coincidence.
She's actually only one on the box art too.
Yep.
Oh wow.
So
There it is. Maybe they took the Terrence Malick approach and they gave them all, like, they were all very active in the filming and filmed tons of footage, and then when they all went to the premiere, half of them were shattered by being left on the cutting room floor, and the others were surprised at how big their role was.
yeah, they're like, where's my scenes? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, some of them are like Bill Pullman and Mickey Rourke coming out and going,
Was I in that movie?
I remember shooting this movie. Somehow I'm not in it.
What happens? So next up, you have the withered lover. Jean Christos was a happy and devoted wife and mother. She died as a result of fire injuries at St. Luke's Hospital half a year before the events of the film began. Unlike most of the ghosts, she is not dangerous and she is benevolent. And that's Tony Shalhoub's wife, right?
Yeah, that's intriguing. How did they describe her? As a jilted?
As the withered lover?
No, but at the start there. What was the start of that explanation?
So her name is Jean, and she was a happy and devoted wife and mother. She died as a result of fire injuries. Which is, it's interesting that, like, it actually gives, like, Tony Shalhoub and, like, Molly Shannon, like, purpose and a stake in this movie, because, like, in the beginning of the movie, you hear about how the 13th ghost is coming, but we never kind of see it play out until, like, the very end of the movie.
You mean Shannon Elizabeth?
Yeah, my bad.
Yeah. Molly Shannon would be a very different choice in that role.
I would see that as well.
Yeah.
It's also that fabulous, ghostly mother. I think ghostly mothers and ghostly children must be the most haunted figures in films.
Yeah. Man, so that's really sad. The Torn Prince. Royce Clayton was a gifted and famous teenage baseball player in the 1950s who caught the eye of colleges around the USA. Thanks to his challenger, a greaser who set him up, Roy died in a accident caused by a cut brake lines, and his remains are still buried at the baseball diamond, and his ghost carries around the baseball bat. I also do not remember this one.
Oh, no, he was the one taking continued swings at Matthew-Lillard, and she's telling him, and Ra Digger's telling him to duck and move out of the way, and he's taking shots.
The baseball wielding, leather jacket
having.
He had the Letterman jacket. Because I kept thinking, he must be a juvenile delinquent. So it's funny that he's actually this star jock. I thought he was like, one of Kiefer Sutherland's mates in Stand By Me, hitting letterboxes off with a baseball bat.
Well, I mean,
sure the brake line was cut and it just wasn't a faulty brakes on a Dodge, because you said he was in a Charger.
No, I said his challenger.
Dodge.
So not a car, a opposing, like, antagonistic figure in the field of baseball.
So not a Dodge Challenger, not Kowalski from Vanishing Planet.
Yeah, a baseball rival, as it was. But it's really interesting that a lot of these so far, like, we've gotten through like a handful of them, but like they're not like malevolent spirits like the movie portrays it, but they're like actually like sympathetic, and they were just kind of in the wrong place the wrong time.
Yeah.
But I guess being caged like that would make you pretty angry.
Yeah, I think that's the whole thing.
It's the accumulated fury of being locked up
for 50 years by a mad billionaire.
Who probably comes and pokes you with sticks every now and then.
He seems the type.
Yeah.
I haven't seen you guys in a while. Poke.
Yeah. That's still stuck there, right?
They do all kind of seem like not above board. They all seem like they have some sort of delinquency to them.
Who's up next?
They're not going to kill the jock unless he's being antagonistic in some way.
Yeah.
somebody's
Or unless
jealous of him overshadowing them or something like that.
Yeah, unless he
Or
was
the
taking
bratty
somebody else's spot on the team or something.
Yeah.
I think I spoke too soon. The Angry Princess is next. Dana Newman was beautiful but abused lady who lived in the late 20th century. She had plastic surgeries to alter her perceived flaws, and after a botched experiment that mutilated her eye, she brutally killed herself in a bathtub at a clinic. Her ghost often carries blood and is naked and carries the same knife that she used to commit suicide, which explains a little bit of the Shannon Elizabeth scene a little bit more, where she's in the bathtub and like she's just kind of staring up at her. Like I feel like it gives a lot more like context and levity for that scene, because I don't know how it is in Australia, but like the standards of beauty always kind of seem like always out of grasp for both men and women. And I mean, that clearly has to mess with your mental health and we perceive to be beautiful. And I think, unfortunately, here you have a victim of that beauty that not only was in a toxic relationship, but also realized that she could never be the standard of beauty that the country had set for her.
Yeah.
And this is before social media. Let's just say that.
Well, I had seen somewhere some more backstory to her character, that she was trying to, when she got denied plastic surgery, she was trying to perform her own.
Oof.
And that's part of it. Yeah, she was one of those people that, like you hear of people with different body issues and eating disorders and stuff, no matter what they actually physically look like, they don't actually see themselves as that. And that was the issue she had. And she got kind of hooked on the plastic surgery trying to fix it. And they started denying her because it became frivolous. And she started trying to perform them on herself and screwed stuff up. So I don't remember where I read that. It was on one of these 13 Ghost backstory websites. But yeah, that was something I'd come across on that specific ghost.
Hearing her backstory makes so much more sense. Like I really liked the bath scene. I thought it was a particularly, like, there was something absolutely fascinating, and you could see that there was something more going on. And that the woman, I'm not quite sure what her name is, that played the angry princess, she did a fine job. That look that she gave the other girl, that was almost a look of like sad curiosity as she was drinking the water. That was really poignant. And hearing that backstory, it just makes me like her performance even more.
Yeah, and Mark, to kind of go off something you were talking about with like all of the like the failed attempts of plastic surgery, like, altering your appearance, like I think I'm also, at least from what I can tell, I am the only person on this call that also may or may not have tattoos. But once you have tattoos and plastic surgery are in theory almost the same exact thing. They're completely worlds apart, but it's like, I can't speak for plastic surgery, but once you get a tattoo, it's like, you're already preparing your next one before your first one's done healing. And go ahead.
The thing with plastic surgery is you have two different types of plastic surgery, though.
True.
You have cosmetic plastic surgery that's, I don't like my nose, change this. And then you have plastic surgery like my dad went through. He had his face crushed. He had an automobile back off the lift because of an unknown problem that a customer didn't tell him. And when they were testing some wires, the car dropped into gear and backed off the lift on his face. And he had plastic surgery to rebuild part of his face.
Reconstruction.
So you have, reconstruct and plastic. So they had to rebuild the bone and stuff, but they also had to kind of put it the way they had to do it to put it all back together. He ended up going to a plastic surgeon as well as reconstructive. And that was when I was a kid. But yeah, there's two different types, almost categories of that. You got just plain cosmetic because you want to look better, change something, and then you've got complete reconstruction and things like that.
Well, I guess with that, like when I'm comparing tattoos, I'm talking specifically about cosmetic because there's something about yourself that you're not wanting to change. Like I just recently got my hand tattooed, and there was probably like a year where I was like, I'd look at my hand every day and just be like, man, like I want a tattoo there so bad. And so you're constantly chasing after that desire to want to be different, and even that like unconscious feeling of where I'm at right now, I'm not the best version of myself. Now, do I feel any different than like now that I've gotten a hand tattoo? No. Do I like to still like, do I feel more complete? No. Like I understand that at the end of the day, like getting reconstructive surgery, sorry, not reconstructive, cosmetic plastic surgery, or, altering my tattoo, like altering my appearance through tattoos, or like if I decide to wear like heavier makeup or like change the way I dress, like that's not going to make me healthy at the end. Like it's not gonna make me happy at the end of the day. Like it's about addressing your own standards for what you deem beautiful, saying F society standards, and embracing the things that's going to bring you healthy mental health is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
I think your tattoos are beautiful. I was just seeing the one on your hand there.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Does that have like a meaning for you?
So back on our Patreon, we did a couple years ago, Mark and I did a Which is Better, Michael Myers Halloween, Rob Zombie versus John Carpenter. And I'm not really a fan of the first one, but the second one actually came out right around the time that a friend of mine had committed suicide. And so that movie and like the exploration of Laurie Strode and Daniel Harris's character means a great deal to me because I relate with those characters so much. And so for me, it's been a reflection of that time period in my life. And so like that is kind of a reminder of like that time period, that even when things look bad or things look rough, that like it's going to get better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just have to say, when you said before you got your hand tattooed, I thought you said you had your aunt tattooed. Like your aunt.
Oh,
for a second there. It's like, I have my aunt tattooed. It's like, wait, what? And then you start talking about your hand. I was always hand. Okay. I just have to mention that image popped in my head. You taking your aunt to the tattooist.
I mean, originally, like way back before I even got tattoos, my mom and I were supposed to go get tattoos together the same time, and it never quite worked out. But it's always been like a running joke in our family that like one day, like me and her will get tattoos together. So I don't know, maybe one day. All right, let's jump back into these ghosts. The Pilgrims is up next. Isabel Smith came to North America as a colonist in order to find new life after being an orphan in England. The tight-knit community ostracized and ignored her and used her as a scapegoat, being accused of witchcraft when crops and animals mysteriously died. She denied such allegations and was trapped in a burning barn and managed to escape unharmed. That sealed her fate, and she died of starvation after being condemned to pillory that she carries with her as a ghost. Her skin is also badly damaged. This one I do remember.
Yeah, she was another one that they only show for a couple seconds in the stocks, carrying around the stocks around her neck and hands.
Was she the one running up the hallway after them and bashing into the thing? Was that her? Or was that someone else?
The jackal is the one that chases them in a couple different scenes. That one was only in one or two scenes, and they just kind of show her running up. She's dressed as essentially as a pilgrim with the thing around her arms and neck.
Yeah, she's in very, very brief sequences. I want to say she's in maybe 2 or 3.
That's one I barely remember. So she was definitely Terrence Malick.
But she's also in one of the more iconic scenes when Matthew-Lillard is kind of like screaming, and she's the ghost that kind of pops up behind him.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I'm like all kinds.
With Matthew-Lillard.
Yeah, getting scared.
I think Matthew-Lillard made that movie only topped by the ghosts themselves.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, let's be honest here. Like Matthew-Lillard is the reason that people keep coming back to these movies, because you're like, the ghosts are interesting and they look cool, but there's not enough backstory about them. But Matthew-Lillard is entertaining and fun and wacky and cool.
Yeah, he's a live wire, that's for sure.
He kind of half retired from acting for a long time to take care of his family.
Yeah, right. I was wondering I didn't know whether it was like maybe he had some personal issues or like.
It was. Yeah. I don't remember the exact details, but I believe it was something to do with his wife. He kind of half retired because he was huge in the 90s and early 2000s, and then just kind of fell off and kind of half disappeared. And he was kind of pulled a Rick Moranis and decided to take care of his family.
Oh wow! And then came back with Twin Peaks, the Return.
He's incredible.
He's terrific in that.
Oh, I haven't seen the Return yet, but he's also did Good Girls on NBC.
Yeah, that's right. He's great in that as well.
He is really good in that.
Yeah.
And
he's got a beautiful depth now. He's got it, as I call it, sadness behind the eyes, or sometimes in front of the eyes, because he's a good crier.
Maybe some of that comes from lived experience.
Yeah.
But another reason too, like he kind of disappeared from the public eye, but he also stayed active. He was the voice of Shaggy for over 10 years. So that's also something that he ended up doing after the 2 James Gunn Scooby-Doo movies. He ended up, I think, in like 2006 or 2007, he took over for the current voice actor, like retired or like died, and he took it over and was the voice up till like 2019 or 2020 even. He did it for a long time.
It says that's funny because that's something you could do for an income as an actor and not have to work much.
Yeah.
You can kind of go into a booth, record all your lines in a day, get paid nicely, and go home to take care of your family. So it's kind of interesting that voice work is what he sort of went into over that period.
One of the key roles I remember seeing him in earlier in his career that really, I think, kind of gets, I don't know, ignored or overlooked was SLC Punk.
I knew you were going to say that.
His role in SLC Punk was fantastic, and he just hit the gamut of emotions in that movie. So,
I've heard of it, but I've not seen it. Yeah, and one of those.
That's exactly what the name implies. It's a bunch of punks in Salt Lake City. Him and his buddy Heroin Bob, that's never done drugs a day in his life. So it's a good drama. If you want to see him in kind of a role that doesn't seem typically him, you see some stuff from him in that movie that you don't really see to that extent in anything else I can think of that he's done, or at least not off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen that one. Next up is The Great Child. Harold Shelbourne was a mentally disabled man who never grew out of diapers and had to be spoon-fed even as a fully grown adult. He often makes baby sounds after being mocked, teased, and tortured relentlessly all his life. He caused a massacre at the old freak show where his mother, Margaret Shelbourne, lived. Some of the freaks had kidnapped and killed his mother as a joke one night. The circus owner, Jimbo, I know. That's pretty dark. This might be the darkest one we've seen so
Very
far
dark.
outside
Yeah.
of The Angry
Mm.
Princess.
Mhm.
The circus owner Jimbo had mutilated Harold beyond recognition, and his ghost appears as Harold did in life with a small batch of hair, a bib covered in vomit, and cloth diapers. He still holds the axe that used to kill his enemies. This one, and then following, give me 1 second, says these guys were a pair. This gets even darker. The dire mother, Margaret Shelburne, Harold's mother, was a shy little lady standing 3 feet tall. She never could stand up for herself, and at the freak show where she lived, she was raped by the tall man, another circus freak, and gave birth to an illegitimate son, Harold, whom she loved more than life itself. She smothered and spoiled him from infancy and never stopped as he grew. This is the main reason for Harold's mental handicap. The two were abused to the point where Harold killed almost the entire circus after Margaret died, and as ghosts they remain together, with Harold being protective like the torso. She is not aggressive and is more of a neutral spirit.
Look, I'm on Team Harold. It's just like, kill them all.
That's what I was going to ask. Were they two different ghosts, or was it the ghost, the great child and dire mother? So they were two separate ghosts.
Yeah, so they were two separate ghosts, and even in the movie, when they're like kind of like going around, they're reading the stories of all the ghosts. They point to them as kind of like a package deal.
They're always there.
They're always there as in the movie, but they are two separate
They were
ghosts.
two separate zodiacs. Okay.
Yes.
I couldn't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, whether they count as two separate symbols or
Yeah.
two symbols that comes a pair.
This makes me want to watch the series even more, because you're thinking about what happens in the spell, because we understand that that's to release his children, but what happens to the 13 ghosts who have been trapped? Do they actually get released as well when that's when that spell is enacted and somebody kind of sacrifices themselves like that? Because it just points out that they were tortured in life and then they were tortured after death, and you want them to have some sort of release.
Well, it did show them when everything gets destroyed. It does show the ghost walking off and disappearing.
That's right. Yeah.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
But that
was really beautiful.
But everything got destroyed, so the spell didn't go through the way it was supposed to, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
So if it had gone through the way it's supposed to, what would have happened? I think that's your question. What would have happened to them had the spell?
Which almost makes you wonder: could they do another kind of like a second season of previous historical attempts to build the machine?
Oh, yeah.
And they're all getting wrong.
Yeah. And somebody having to retouch them all.
Who would have been the ghost for the Zodiacs at those different time periods?
Yeah, and then other equivalents from different centuries. Oh, this is a 6 seasons in a movie.
I just love how this entire podcast is kind of just like turned into like a blueprint for how like either Netflix or HBO can like redeem this movie.
I don't think the movie needs to be redeemed.
It doesn't.
Just continue the story.
Just expand
it. Yeah.
The
Yeah,
extended universe.
the groundwork that Steve Beck lays in this movie is pretty incredible, and it's a typical like ghost movie, but because you have like all these like sad stories and like these character moments, like it has such a rich thing. And Perry, you brought up something that it kind of interests me is like, these guys were like tortured in life and also in death, but like I'm also curious about this like universe's like take on ghosts, because like ours isn't like like sometimes you see ghosts in certain mythologies that like a ghost is a ghost because there's unfinished business here. So I'm also curious about like what that unfinished business is here. Like, are all of them kind of like fueled by vengeance to kind of like take and like haunt like the source of their own deaths, or what is their quote unfinished business if they are in fact ghosts?
Yeah, that's really interesting. He's created a fantastic mythology here. Like there's it's so rich that you can just keep digging into it. Like that's great.
So is it Steve Beck that did all the writers, or who's like in that DVD special feature? Like, do they sort of mainly talk to Beck? Do they?
Wait, repeat that.
Yeah, no. Like, who actually was it Steve Beck as director that created all this mythology, or was it the writers? Like, and when in this DVD feature, who do they sort of talk to? Is it?
So I think it might have been like a hive mind essentially of the writers and Steve Beck, because like the special features that I saw about like the making of the ghosts, like Steve basically had it in his mind like how each like kind of had like this like minor backstory for each of the characters, but like predominantly how they were gonna look and like what the point of like their aggression and like how they ended up becoming ghosts was gonna be. And so I think that this is kind of like a collection of like the two writers and Steve just kind of like sitting down and saying, all right, like we're gonna create this really rich lore and mythology, and we're gonna start with these 13 ghosts and then develop the Cyrus's house and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I would personally, I don't know about how you guys feel, but I would love to have a backstory on Cyrus's kind of like how he kind of got into the occult and kind of like accumulated and kind of rose to be this kind of like ghost hunter.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm being interrupted by my dog. I'll be right
I'm loving
back.
it. I'm living
I think
for
he
it.
wants to go out. I saw him nosing the door. I'll be right back.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
All right. So next up, I have the Hammer, a happy and honest family man and blacksmith. George Markley was falsely accused of stealing by a higher up named Nathan and threatened with exile from their old Western town. George refused to leave, and his family was lynched by Nathan and his band of thugs while walking home from the town market one day. Seeking justice in the corrupt town, George took his blacksmith's hammer and killed those responsible, but the town folk chained him to a tree and drove railroad spikes to his body. His left hand was cut off and his hammer was crudely attached to it. His ghost is one of the more angry spirits and is partially responsible for Dennis's death.
So do you see any similarities between the Hammer and Candyman?
Oh,
yeah,
very much so.
A little bit. Yeah, just even attaching the thing to the hand. Yeah. And again, I'm on Team George. Interesting.
He was definitely one of the more interesting ghosts, and I don't know if it's just because he had more screen time or just his sheer physicality and size and his imposing nature compared to the others. The only other two that really had the really intimidation factor that he had was the Juggernaut and the Jackal.
Yeah.
Mm.
The angry
What
princess just had a creep factor to her.
Yeah.
I think this one in particular, and like his backstory feels like really timely because, I brought up Watchmen earlier, and Watchmen kind of introduced a entirely new generation to the Tulsa Massacre of 1921, which we did an entire series about. Go check out our Watchmen series. And it's this largely forgotten, just ugly stamp on American history. And I think that, there are so many untold stories that are like George's. And, even modernly speaking, like we're still seeing like racial injustice take place and occur. And, this would be such an interesting story to explore and really make him almost kind of like, Mark, you brought up Candyman earlier, like, to kind of take that story and bring it to like a new spin, I think would be just an awesome addition to the lore that these guys created here.
Yeah, it's a lot like Watchmen do with the Hooded Justice, in that
Yeah.
sort of context, that sort of recontextualizing that character for Untold,
It almost reminds me of the character Chalky White from Boardwalk Empire. Am I the only one that's seen that?
No, is that Michael K. Williams that plays Chalky?
Yeah.
Beautiful actor. Yeah.
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah.
He tells the story of his dad. He's been essentially given 5 minutes alone with the Grand Dragon and KKK. And he starts telling a story about his dad while rolling out woodworking tools. And this rich guy in town hired his dad to build him some bookshelves, and he built the best bookshelves in town. One of the other families got jealous, and they basically lynched him. And now he's using the tools of his dad's trade to torture the Grand Dragon and KKK. So it's kind of an interesting story that you hear 3 completely different movies and shows, but a very similar kind of story.
That's very cool.
Mm.
And
These stories are so.
It's such a rich way to make those stories visceral, because it's, through our emotions, I think that change hopefully can occur. So to bring those stories to life so viscerally is, I think that's one of the really important things you can do in storytelling.
Yeah, that's why, like, Mark, I'm really glad you brought up Candyman. Like, Candyman's kind of like, as a horror, is definitely like rose in the ranks with one of my favorite slasher movies, just because of how important it is, and like the issues that it's addressing as far as racism, the way that we look at more impoverished cities, gentrification, interracial love, and just that story is so rich. And, even here you have a guy that basically was just trying to be like a good husband and father, and, it just happens to be, wrongly accused just because the color of his skin. Like, that just seems like real sad to me. And, but again, I understand our history and where we've come from, and how we have grown in some ways and haven't grown in others. So I understand.
Well, even now, my daughter is part Puerto Rican, and she fills out Hispanic on all of her paperwork. And she has had teachers in school tell her, "You're not Hispanic." And it's like, have you met my mother?
Yeah.
Her mom is, you meet my daughter's mom. Yeah.
Very much.
My daughter's grandma and great grandma on her mom's side of the family were like fresh off the boat New Yorican. So that my daughter's great grandma couldn't even speak English. I only met her shortly before she passed, and my daughter's grandma was bilingual. And for whatever reason, her mom never taught her Spanish, which I'm a little disappointed with. But she's actually had teachers in school, because she fills out Hispanic on her paperwork, tell her that she's not Hispanic. She needs to check the Caucasian box
Yeah.
because she's part Puerto Rican. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Mm.
That doesn't make sense to me in our current day and age, because like we live in a society now where, you know, gender is another great example where it's male, female, I'd rather not say.
Mm.
And like, you know, if someone is in transition and they are a female at birth transitioning to be a male, you can't look at them and say you're wrong because, you know, you have to go with what you're. It's like we don't know your family history, like we don't know like what you're currently going through, and I feel like teachers should be allowed to say that to kids.
Yeah, it's kind of like the kid's not ticking Hispanic as a goof.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like it's clearly, you know, it's clearly her family history, and it's like it's clearly her ethnicity. It's like, again, like you say, not the teacher's role to kind of go, you're not this, you're this. It's like, well, believe the kid.
The only thing in their favor is there's a running joke that I'm not white, I'm fluorescent. I'm a ginger. I'm not as white as you could possibly get. And unfortunately, she has that complexion and looks like me. They rarely met, the schools have rarely met her mother. But yeah, they tell her you're not, she's had a couple teachers over the last few years tell her you're not Hispanic, you're Caucasian, you need to check the Caucasian box. And she tells them that you need to call and talk to my dad.
Yeah.
And they kind of drop the subject because the schools don't like me very much.
Well, I identify very strongly with that because I'm a half caste Roma. My dad is a full blood Romani, and not only his people just out now don't believe me when I say that, but also it's a culture in Australia that is still demonized and scapegoated. So my dad wasn't even able to claim his culture and his identity when he was alive. It was like a dirty secret to.
What was that culture again?
Romani, traveller.
So
yeah.
In the past, people have used what we call the G word, which is gypsy.
Which is actually a racial
epithet. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I've never heard that term before.
Yeah.
Romani.
Interesting. I'm sorry
so
to
I
hear
might
that.
look like a nice white middle class lady, but I'm actually, half caste Roma and grew up in a dirt floor shack.
Interesting.
It's amazing the information we're getting out of talking about these ghosts, isn't
it? The 13 ghosts sort of, there's been a pathway to learning about the Romani culture. So who we got now? Who's ghost number? What are we up to? 12?
12. The Jackal is number 12. Born to a prostitute in 1887, Ryan Khan developed a sick appetite for women, attacking and raping strays and prostitutes in the night. Very Jack the Ripper-ish. He voluntarily went to Borehamwood Institute for treatment to cure this problem, but the medical practices made him much worse, causing him to completely go insane after years of solitary confinement. Having his head locked in a cage after breaking out of his straitjacket and developing a hatred for humanity. When the asylum burst into flames, he chose to stay behind and perish in the fire. His ghost carries his torn straitjacket with a torn cube head cage. It is called a sign of Hell's Winter. He is one of the more aggressive and violent ghosts, attacking and nearly killing Kathy before Kalina saves her.
I believe that's the biggest understatement of the movie. One of them more aggressive, probably the most aggressive.
I did not
clock the most deadly, but
I did not clock that the Jackal was a man. I thought it was a woman.
Well, from the time period, if he had been locked in an institution like that, they may not have kept up with haircuts and stuff.
No, probably not. And and he's quite lean and the long hair. Yeah, I just kind of it's always the woman. There you go. We've all learned something today.
So we're getting to my favorite now.
And interesting, like the jackal is one of the most. The jackal is probably the most unrepentant character that we've got so far. You know, that all the others have a reason. The jackal just seems like a psycho.
It's interesting. Go ahead. It's interesting too because like from a character design point of view, like I think the reason that we think that the jackal is a female actually because like the jackal from a character design perspective solely looks like the fully Pazuzu'd version of Reagan from The Exorcist.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That did occur to me. Yeah. He does
like just a lot taller, but
and a lot
weird.
Older, yeah.
Just a little bit. All right, so the Juggernaut is our last one. Horace Breaker Mahoney was born disfigured and was an outcast his entire life. His mother abandoned him at a tender age, and his father put him to work in the junkyard, using his unusual strength to crush cars. After his father died, Horace went insane, and he would take motorists and hitchhikers, tear them apart with his bare hands, and feed the remains to his dogs. After several of these murders, he was arrested. A SWAT team shot and killed him. After he broke free of his handcuffs, as a ghost, he remained in the junkyard with his body riddled with bullet holes. Killing intruders, both Dennis and Cyrus remarked that his kill count in the numbered in the 40s, making this the ghost one of the most evil and dangerous of the 12.
I loved the Juggernaut. I don't know if it was because of the opening scene or when he finally gets cut loose in the house. The Juggernaut was my favorite in the bunch. Picking up a car and smashing it nose first into a guy, that Juggernaut was my favorite.
Yeah, I love that. So the father used him to crush cars. Like we've all seen car crushes, right? Like the size. Like this is a man smashing car. Like what? Like is he Kryptonian? Like what is going on? But yeah, he's great, and the design is terrific. Once you get to the jackal and the Juggernaut, that starts to sound like the Con Air of ghosts.
I mean, very much so, because like, and you know, the fact that when you think about this movie in particular, you always think about the jackal and the Juggernaut. Like those are the two that you always come up. And I mean, I will also throw in the Angry Princess just because sex sells.
Yes, and she's very prominent, but she has that sadness that we talked about before. That there's. I don't think
she is so memorable because of being topless the whole time. I really don't. I think it was her almost stalking and creepy nature.
Yeah,
because she just kind of showed up and made things creepy in the scenes that she was in. I mean, even when she runs into the lawyer in the basement, she's kind of more creepy than anything else, staring at him with the knife as he gets cut in half by the glass doors.
But also kind of sad the way she looks at Shannon Elizabeth and is around there as well. You know, there's this sort of regret. It's melancholy.
Yeah, there's some good actors on that backup.
Yeah, her character design too, I think, is the reason why. But also, like, I think out of all of these, like, for someone that has lost someone to suicide, like that's just an indescribable pain that you can't quite come to terms with. And I understand grief is grief, but like I've lost people to car accidents, cancer, and that list goes on and on. Yeah. But there's never like it's a very profoundly deep knife in the wound that gets twisted when you lose someone to suicide. And so out of like going through all of these, like I definitely think that she is definitely, as we've been saying, like she's definitely the most like sad. And the fact that she just kind of creeps around, it almost kind of gives off this impression that she's not necessarily a ghost that is necessarily wanting to harm anyone, but wanting community and wanting validation. I feel like that's kind of like the reason that she's kind of like stayed around, is because, you know, we talked earlier about how like ghosts are here because they have unfinished business, and it feels like she doesn't quite have that community that she's wanted. And so that's the reason why she's kind of looking at and interacting with the live action characters the way that she does.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it too, though, is that I feel like she was almost jealous of Shannon Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm.
Is almost what it looked like to me, because she raises the knife to her at one point when she's standing behind her in one of the little flashes in the bathroom. She raises the knife to her like she's going to stab her, almost like she's jealous of her physical appearance compared to hers. And if she had that kind of an issue before she died, then it would completely make sense.
Yeah, scams.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's a great assessment too. But then you get into like getting into like the Jackal and the Juggernaut, like they're just two of them, like the most like brutal spirits in this movie. And like the fact that
animals.
Yeah, like the fact that this movie opens up on the Juggernaut, and you just kind of get to see like his brutality firsthand before we even meet any of like the main characters. Like you just kind of see like this guy is just brutal as they come. And that like that junkyard scene is like it's pretty terrifying.
Yeah, I think
he has that almost disconnected, vacant brutality, which is, you know, intrinsically human. I don't think there's any other animal that has that kind of detached brutality that you see in characters like the Juggernaut, which is so terrifying.
Just killing them because they're there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that entire opening scene had to be there to almost let you know how bad the Juggernaut really was. Because you see it later in the movie, full Matthew Lillard around a corner post. But if you had just seen that with little flashes of him until then, I don't think it would have the impact of seeing him just dismantle a hit squad in the middle of a junkyard like they did.
Exactly.
Yeah, and to kind of go off to something that Perry talked about, like only like humans really being the only kind of brutal animals for the sake of brutality. You think about like we took a break earlier and we are talking about like animals, like, you know, you think about like lions and tigers and bears, like they kill because it's kind of like the circle of life. It's the food chains. Like there's the predatory, they're doing it for survival and for food. Whereas, you know, we, you know, as a species, we do that because like we inflict pain solely because, you know, there's something perhaps maybe biologically incorrect with us or undiagnosed, or, you know, there's just a number of reasons why we inflict pain on others.
Well, even there are cases in the animal kingdom. I know some primates, or some of them lions, or some of them a new male, dominant male will come in and are known to kill like the cubs and stuff like that because it's not theirs and they don't want any future challenge. So there is that aspect of animal behavior where they will kill indiscriminately like that. But nothing like you see with humans and serial killers or anything like that. Nothing that I can think of off the top of my head. Maybe the closest being dolphins and some of the way they screw around with fish for fun. And dolphins, they claim, are just as smart as we are in their own way, if not smarter. But they do have dolphins are interesting to read up on. They have some somewhat sadistic things that they will do, and they're one of the only known animals that'll do that outside of the human race that I'm aware of.
It's those levels of self-awareness, isn't it? And of self-determination. Like the more of that you have, the less you run on instinct and the more you run on self-awareness and self-determination, the more cruel and sadistic you seem to get, which is a terrifying parallel. Good thing we're giving machines more awareness and racing headlong into the singularity, because sci-fi films haven't warned us about that.
Yeah, Terminator never happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then even with humans, when you start getting into the psychological aspects of like serial killers, you end up finding out that a lot of them have conditions that perfectly normal human beings have. But due to conditions like the perfect conditions growing up, going through them, they end up becoming these monsters. Like if you read about Ed Gein is one of the most interesting ones you'll ever read about. And he's had so many characters based on him: Leatherface, Norman Bates, Wild Bill, and Hannibal Lecter. They're all based roughly on different aspects of Ed Gein. And he was a slow individual, to put it nicely. He wasn't quite all there. I don't remember what the deal was with his dad, but his mom was mentally abusive. And I believe they said she was physically abusive, but he had one of these conditions combined with being of a low IQ, that in those exact conditions, it ended up setting him up to be what he turned out to be. And they took him to trial. I believe they determined he wasn't capable of being tried, I believe. And he ended up living out his days in a mental institution, and they said he was the perfect role model. He was the perfect inmate. He used to help clean and help in the different wards. And they were like, it's hard to imagine that he was the monster that he was.
It's interesting.
I'm one of those weirdos that knows this stuff.
Yeah. Well, no, we love it as well. Yeah. I think we all want a third season of Mindhunter. It's a fascinating case. And again, like you said, you take those temptations and those circumstances away that obviously trigger this person because of their abuse and their programming. They're perfectly fine. Like, I mean, yeah, it's the human mind is a strange and fragile thing that we know. I think we still know relatively little about.
Yeah, and I think that we as a culture, there's like this weird like uptick that's recently kind of taken over in like the last 10-15 years, where you're starting to see like people becoming more and more interested with like true crime and like the psychology of like how things work. And I would be remiss not to say this, but Bobby, it was a true crime podcaster in this movie before it was even cool.
Yeah, with these little
little microphone.
Price microphones. True. He's getting ahead of the curve. And I think that's what he may have gone on to do.
I think he was actually practicing to be like a newscaster, wasn't he? I think that was his explanation.
We know where he went.
Pretty sure. Yeah. Just a broadcasting journalist now.
Yeah. I have a feeling that he was meant to go to the asylum to see Mike Myers on Halloween 2018, but he was ill that day, so they just sent the older guy and the lady, and he survived. He's okay. Yeah.
He's like, "Ooh, dodged a bullet on that one." All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for us talking about 13 Ghosts. Paul, Perry, thank you guys so much. We're super excited to have Apparitions making not only its U.S. debut with Horrific Hope, but even having it in the festival. This movie is deeply it's really rich as far as like the storytelling aspect of it goes. But it just subverts a lot of expectations, and I can't wait to bring this to our festival. You guys can buy your tickets now. But where can people find you guys online?
So we're at cinema-viscera.com. So it's all one word, cinema as in, film and what have you. Viscera, it's like visceral, but with the L. So cinema-viscera.com is where you can find all of our stuff. And on all the socials, including Letterboxd, we're also Cinema Viscera there as well. So come look for us.
Where can people find you?
Oh, me? Where's me now? Okay. As usual, I'm on Instagram doing my miniature model painting and stuff like that, and titanium Juggernaut painting.
Well, you guys can find me. I am on Letterboxd at Captain Nostalgia. It's the only active social media site I use. You guys can follow our parent company, Victims and Villains, to find out more information about this year's Horrific Hope lineup, where to get tickets, more podcasts like this, movie reviews, links to all of our social media, including Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, Patreon, YouTube, and wherever you guys get your podcasts from. And most importantly, above all else, you guys can find links to our mental health resource library, all of which you guys can find links to, as well as links to cinema-viscera.com and all of their socials in the descriptions below. But until next time, remember that the longer that you gaze into the abyss, the more the abyss gazes back into you.